and welcome to this week's Hippie Hyena. This week, I've got a few new subscribers, so welcome. Hope you get something out of it. This week, we're looking at a guy called Nathanial Abbott, who is a particularly unpleasant example, and he's got some kind of problem with modern relationships. Let's jump in and see what he's got to say for himself, shall we?
What's up? In this video, we're going to be talking about the modern relationship, specifically how the standard relationship model has degraded over time, going from dating for the purpose of getting married to what we have now being one-night stands, drunken hookups, open relationships, polyamory, and basically everything else in between.
Okay, interesting premise, except it sort of fails to address. There's like this elephant in the room. Why would I think that one of those things is better than the other? Like, marriage is dumb. I don't really understand the point in it. Kind of stupid. And, polyamory and all of those other things sound pretty cool to me. So, he's gonna have to do a bit better if, hopefully he won't just, assume that I agree with that, because why would anyone?
How we as a society need a return to tradition, and how all this nonsense started with the sexual revolution and birth control.
Oh dear. He's doing all this kind of like, hey, I'm a young person, I'm talking in a young person lingo, hey, all that kind of biz. But underneath it, there's just a sad old man, someone like Dennis Prager, who's completely out of touch with the modern world. Like, how does this happen? How does this happen that someone young as this person is, as Nathaniel is, end up with like the internal psychology of a kind of 70-year-old curmudgeon? It's weird. It's really weird. It's almost like, there's some sort of get-out-like scheme where elderly conservatives are having their brains put into Zoomers' bodies.
Now, for all of human history, there has been certain factors that have regulated our behavior and prevented us from doing cringe and degenerate things. These primary factors being what the culture and religion deems to be cringe and degenerate, and the societal consequences for violating that standard, which historically speaking would have been being ostracized and maybe even jail. And then there's also the consequences of those actions that you deal with personally, like harm to your personal well-being.
Yeah, and those things were awful. This was a society that was buttoned down, where people just couldn't be themselves and be who they wanted to be. They didn't have the freedom to sort of express what was inside them, and they were sort of restricted in a kind of oppressive regime. That's just literally what Nathaniel Abbott is describing, and what he's lamenting the loss of. These things that he calls degeneracy, I call reasonable behavior from awesome people, expressing their freedoms and rights. And what he's lamenting is the fact that they have these freedoms and rights that he wants to take away. And it's just weird, because why is he sort of so up in other people's business? Why does he care? It's so, petty and nosy and kind of Karenish, Just leave it alone. It's none of your business. Get out of it. They don't want you involved in their personal, private lives, It's none of your business. And, he hasn't explained yet, and maybe he will go on to, but he hasn't explained yet why he thinks any of those things are degenerate. Because, that's really quite subjective, because what I find degenerate is probably the sort of shit that he likes to get into, the whole traditional family unit. Ugh, who wants to be a part of that? Gross.
Now, when it comes to sexual degeneracy, those consequences for all of human history were incredibly damning. You have sex outside of marriage, aka you post cringe, you get banned from the Minecraft server, metaphorically speaking. And you had to deal with the personal consequences of pregnancy and disease. But all of a sudden in the 1950s, some scientist dudes synthesized some hormones to create the birth control pill. They were trying to do science and make something new, first mistake, but they invented this hormone pill, which basically became widely available to married women after the Supreme Court case of Griswold v. Connecticut in the mid-1960s, and then to non-married women in 1972. Now, for the first time in human history, people had a reliable way of preventing pregnancy that wasn't sheep intestine.
Yeah, we generally, like, make progress and stuff. You know, like, in the way that we invented cars so we don't have to walk everywhere, or, like, have horses and stuff. You know, that's what happens. We figure out ways of streamlining the process and making our lives better. You know, originally, we didn't have soap, and we faced the consequences of getting sick all the time, of just living around the world. But then we invented soap, so we don't have to get sick all the time. And you know, all of that stuff about you've posted cringe and you've moved off the Minecraft server. Jesus Christ. I know he's like a little tot, but even so, it just has this incredibly cringy kind of hello fellow kids kind of vibe to it. And I really wish he'd stop doing that.
Which everyone was pretty stoked about. Finally, women were freed from the oppressive realities of a functioning reproductive system, allowing everyone to participate in a sterilized version of the Life-Creating Act without consequences. Or so they thought. Funny thing happened, though, with the success of birth control, where people weren't getting pregnant, but instead, they were getting AIDS.
Oh my god. Jesus. This is just disgusting. It's so disgusting. Oh, he's kind of, you know, blaming female liberation on the proliferation of AIDS. You know, ignoring the fact that, well, for a start, the AIDS pandemic basically happened for the most part in the gay community originally, amongst homosexual men who, forget me if I'm wrong, but probably don't need to take birth control. So absurd. And second of all, you can catch AIDS from all kinds of different things, not just sex. Blood transfusions, like sharing a needle with someone if you're a drug addict, or, you know, all kinds of different things. Or maybe some people have been born with AIDS because their parents had AIDS. I mean, this is sort of basically classic victim blaming from the right. It's what they like to do, like twist things and blame the victims so that they, you know, don't have to take responsibility for theirs and the elite they shill for's responsibility in this. But, like, you know, if you're going to start sort of classifying AIDS as a sort of almost divine punishment for degenerate behaviour, what about all the other things? What about why stop there? Why not cancer? Is cancer a punishment for degeneracy? What about skin cancer? It's a punishment for the degeneracy of going in the sun? Or maybe getting a heart condition is part of the degeneracy, is like a punishment for the degeneracy of eating red meat, maybe. Or maybe hay fever is kind of like the divine punishment for going outside at all. It's just absolutely ridiculous.
You win some, you lose some. Now, with the risk of out-of-wedlock pregnancy basically nullified by birth control, with it, over time, went the stigma of premarital sex.
Which is a good thing. You pathetic little virgin. God damn it. And this basically is what this all boils down to. He's not really upset about premarital sex as a sort of universal concept, although he may say that he is. What he's really upset about is other people having premarital sex that doesn't include him. They're having premarital sex with people who aren't him. And that basically is the root of all of this sort of idiotic posturing about, you know, taking things back to tradition. Because I've got bad news for you, Nathanial. They wouldn't have had sex with you back then either. They wouldn't have married you. You know, you'd be in pretty much exactly the same situation as you would be now. An incel. But I know, you know, the grass is always greener, and you like to look back with nostalgia goggles and imagine that if things were like they were then now, that you'd be on the top of the social hierarchy. You wouldn't be. You wouldn't, because you're a loser. And you're stuck in the past from now. So if you were back then, you'd probably be stuck in the past from before then. You know, you're at odds with the current time, and that wouldn't change. And you know, there is nothing that straight women or gay men find more attractive than Dennis Prager in a sweaty little twink's body.
In the past, if an unmarried couple had sex and then got pregnant, which is, you know, historically how those things typically went, fear of being deemed cringe would have basically forced them to get married and then raise the kid, aka take responsibility for their actions. But women, of course, were no longer getting pregnant because they were using hormones to sterilize themselves. And because of this sterilization of the Life-Creating Act and pregnancy no longer being a logical consequence with it, we began to lose the morality associated with the act. What used to be something that created life and chemically bonded a couple became a recreational activity that you could do with anyone and everyone consequence-free.
Yep, so here's my pitch. Here's my pitch to the listeners, and maybe Nathanial Abbott, if he was open to some kind of development, progress, anything in his own life, which I severely doubt. But, let's give him the benefit of the doubt for some mad reason. Here's my pitch. So you have a choice. You can either be a bitter, curmudgeonly, 70-year-old man stuck in the body of a sweaty twink that people generally find deeply unattractive, or you could come over to our side and have all of the consequence-free, fun, sexual activity with whoever you want, whenever you want, as long as you can find someone who wants to consent, of which they're much more likely to do if you have the attitude of encouraging people to enjoy their lives. So that's basically what it points down to. You want to be on the right, you can be bitter, miserable and alone, or you can join the left and you can have fun, have friends, and generally have a good time and spend your life in a worthwhile way. So yeah, have a think about that choice and think really which one is the one that you want to, which side is it that you want to join. Well, I hope you got something out of this video, whether you are a newly, freshly minted subscriber or you've been here from the start. Thanks very much for watching. Goodbye.